Let me begin with a story. There was a woman I once heard about. Let's call her Helen. She was 66 years old. Very sharp, very attentive. She loved doing word puzzles in the morning, never missed an important date, and always seemed to remember things everyone else forgot. Her family used to joke that she didn't need a phone to look things up. She already knew everything. But then, slowly, something began to shift. About a year after a new medication was added to her daily routine, her daughter started noticing small changes. At first, it didn't seem serious. Helen would forget what she had just said. She would walk into a room and pause, trying to remember why she was there. She got slightly confused on a route she had driven for years. Then it became more noticeable. She started repeating the same questions. Conversations became harder to follow. Simple things required more effort. Naturally, her family became concerned. They began looking for answers. And like many people in this situation, they were told it could be the beginning of serious age-related memory changes. But here's the part that almost no one mentioned. And this is the part I really want you to pay attention to. In Helen's case, it wasn't simply age. It was her daily routine. More specifically, what she was taking regularly. When her routine was carefully reviewed, and adjustments were made step by step, something unexpected happened. Her clarity began to return. Not overnight, but gradually. Within a few months, she was back to doing her puzzles again, more focused, more present. This isn't a rare story, and it's not about luck, it's about awareness. Today, I want to walk you through 9 common types of medications that may quietly affect your memory, your focus, and your mental clarity. We'll go from the ones most people overlook, all the way to something at the end that isn't just one medication, but a pattern that many people never realize is happening. And I strongly recommend you stay with me until the end, because that last point ties everything together. Before we go further, I want to be clear about something. I'm not suggesting that you stop anything you're currently taking. That's not the goal here. The goal is simple: to help you notice, to help you ask better questions, to help you understand what may be affecting how you feel day to day. Because when it comes to your clarity and your well-being, being informed matters. And if you feel comfortable, you can also share your experience. Are you over 60? What does your daily routine look like? Sometimes just talking about it helps others realize they're not alone. Alright, let's begin. Number 9. This is something many people don't even think twice about, and yet it's incredibly common. Sleep aids and allergy medications that contain ingredients like diphenhydramine. You've probably seen them, often labeled as nighttime relief or PM formula. They seem simple, convenient, easy. They help you sleep, they reduce discomfort. So what could be the issue? Here's what's important to understand. These types of products affect a system in your brain that plays a key role in memory, focus, and alertness. When you're younger, your brain has more flexibility. But over time, that system becomes more sensitive. And when it's regularly disrupted, even in small ways, the effects can begin to show. Not suddenly, but gradually. You might feel slightly more tired during the day. You may notice it takes a little longer to recall words, or that your thinking feels less sharp than it used to. And the most important part? It often doesn't feel like it's connected to what you're taking. It just feels like getting older. Another thing to keep in mind is that this ingredient is not always obvious. It appears in many over-the-counter products, especially anything designed for sleep or nighttime use. So what can you do? If you're using something like this regularly, it may be worth asking whether there are alternatives that don't affect your mind in the same way. For allergies, there are newer options that tend to stay more focused outside the brain. And for sleep, we'll talk about safer approaches a little later. Let's move on. Number 8. This is something millions of people take every day without thinking twice. Medications for acid discomfort or reflux. Now, these can absolutely be helpful when needed, but here's something that often goes unnoticed. Your stomach doesn't just handle digestion. It also plays a key role in helping your body absorb certain nutrients. And one of the most important for your brain is vitamin B12. This nutrient supports memory, energy, and overall mental clarity. When levels slowly decrease, the signs are easy to miss. You may feel more tired, less focused, a bit more forgetful than usual. And again, it's very easy to assume this is just part of aging. But sometimes, there's more to it. Another thing to consider is how long these medications are used. Many were originally intended for shorter periods. But in real life, people often continue taking them for months or even years, without revisiting whether they still need them. So what's a practical step? It may be helpful to review whether daily use is still necessary. In some cases, small changes in routine, like meal timing or portion size, can make a difference. And if you do continue using them, paying attention to your nutrient levels can be a smart move. Because sometimes, it's not about removing something, it's about making sure your body still gets what it needs. Now, let's finish with number 8. There's one more layer here that's worth understanding. Some research suggests that long-term use of these medications may influence how certain proteins behave in the brain over time. You don't feel this directly, there's no immediate signal, but over years, small changes can begin to add up. That's why awareness matters. Not fear, awareness. Because when you understand what's happening, you can make more informed decisions. Alright, let's move to number 7. This is a topic that many people don't like to talk about, but it's incredibly common: bladder control medications. If you've ever dealt with frequent nighttime interruptions, urgency, or discomfort, you know how frustrating it can be. It affects sleep, it affects confidence, it affects daily life. So when something is offered that promises relief, of course you take it. That makes sense. But here's what often doesn't get explained clearly. Some of these medications don't just work on the bladder, they also affect how signals travel in the brain. And those signals are directly connected to memory and learning. Over time, this can lead to subtle changes. You may notice it's harder to concentrate. You may struggle to find the right words. You may feel like your thoughts aren't as clear as they used to be. And again, this doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly, which is why it's often mistaken for normal aging. The important thing to know is this: not all medications in this category work the same way. Some newer options use different mechanisms and tend to have less impact on mental clarity. So if this is something you're dealing with, it may be worth having a conversation about alternatives, especially if you've noticed changes in how you think or remember. Let's continue. Number 6. This is one of the most sensitive topics on the list. Because for many people, these medications have felt like a lifeline at some point. Medications often used for anxiety, sleep, or intense stress. And it's important to acknowledge that. For some people, they provided real relief during difficult moments. But here's what's important to understand over the long term. These medications work by calming the brain. They slow things down. They reduce intensity. And in the short term, that can feel helpful. But when that calming effect is constant, over months or years, something else can begin to happen. The brain adapts. It becomes less responsive on its own. Its ability to stay flexible, to form new connections, to process information, can gradually weaken. You may notice that learning new things feels harder. Your memory feels slower. Your reactions feel delayed. And here's where it becomes tricky. If you try to stop suddenly, your body may react strongly. Sleep becomes more difficult. Anxiety can return more intensely, which makes it feel like you need the medication even more. This creates a cycle that can be difficult to break. That's why the most important thing here is this: never make sudden changes. If adjustments are needed, they should always be gradual and supported. And there are other approaches that can help support sleep and emotional balance in a more natural way. We'll touch on some of those later. Let's continue. Number 5. This one needs a balanced approach because it's often misunderstood. These are medications used to support heart health by managing cholesterol levels. And for many people, they play an important role. But here's something that doesn't always get discussed in detail. Your brain relies on certain fats to function properly. They are part of how your brain cells communicate with each other. They help signals move efficiently. They support structure and stability. So when levels are reduced too aggressively, in some cases, it may influence how clearly those signals are transmitted. What does that feel like? For some people, it shows up as mental fog, slower recall, a feeling that thinking isn't as sharp as before. Now, this doesn't happen to everyone, and it doesn't mean these medications aren't useful. It simply means there can be differences depending on the type used and how your body responds. Some options are less likely to affect the brain. So if you've noticed changes in your clarity, it may be worth discussing whether adjustments could help you maintain both heart support and mental sharpness. Also, supporting your body's energy systems can be helpful, since certain compounds may be reduced over time. Let's move forward. Number 4. This one often surprises people, because it's used for many different reasons, not just mood. It can be given for nerve discomfort, sleep issues, or long-term tension in the body. And sometimes, it's chosen specifically because it helps people feel more relaxed at night. But here's what's important. This type of medication strongly interacts with systems in the brain that are closely tied to memory and thinking. Over time, this can lead to gradual changes. Not dramatic, but noticeable if you pay attention. You may find it harder to organize your thoughts. You may lose your train of thought mid-sentence. You may feel like holding complex ideas in your mind takes more effort. And because these changes happen slowly, they're often dismissed. People assume it's just part of getting older. But in some cases, the medication itself is contributing. The encouraging part is this: there are other options available today that tend to have less impact on mental clarity. So if something feels off, it may be worth exploring alternatives that support your needs without adding unnecessary strain on your thinking. Alright, now we come to number 3, and I want you to pay close attention here, because this is something that happens more often than people realize. These are medications originally designed for serious mental health conditions. They are powerful, and in the right situations, they can be necessary. But sometimes, they are used in situations where the goal is simply to calm behavior, to reduce restlessness, to make things more manageable, especially in care environments. And here's the concern: these medications can significantly slow down how the brain processes information. They reduce activity in systems related to motivation, movement, and decision-making. Over time, this can lead to less emotional expression, slower thinking, reduced mental engagement. A person may seem quieter, more withdrawn, less responsive. And again, it can be misunderstood as natural decline, but sometimes it's the effect of what's being taken. If you or someone close to you is using something like this, it's important to ask clear questions. Why is it being used? Is it necessary? Is there a plan to reduce or reassess? Are there non-medication approaches that could help instead? Because understanding the why behind it makes a big difference. Let's continue. Number 2. This one doesn't get enough attention, although it probably should. It belongs to a group of medications often considered more modern and generally well tolerated. And for the most part, that's true. But there's one specific option in this category that behaves a little differently from the others. While most medications in this group tend to leave certain brain systems relatively undisturbed, this one interacts with them more directly. And those systems are closely connected to memory and clarity. What does that mean in practice? Some people may notice changes in short-term recall. You might forget what was just said, or struggle to find the right word at the right moment. It can feel subtle at first, but over time, it becomes more noticeable. And again, it's easy to assume it's just age. The important thing to understand is that alternatives exist within the same category. Options that provide similar support, but with less impact on mental clarity. So if this is something you're currently using, it may be worth asking whether a different option could better support both your emotional balance and your focus. Alright, now we come to number 1, and this is the most important part of this entire conversation. Because number 1 is not a single medication. It's a pattern. Something that happens quietly, gradually, and very often goes unnoticed. Here's what I mean. Each of the things we've talked about today, on its own, may only have a mild effect, something small, something easy to ignore. But in real life, people rarely take just one thing. Many people take several, sometimes 4, 5, even more. A combination of prescriptions, over-the-counter products, and supplements, often recommended by different specialists, and not always reviewed together as a complete picture. Now here's where it becomes important. When multiple items affect the same system in the brain, their impact doesn't just add up. It can build on itself, gradually, quietly, until one day, something feels different. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone, let's call her Linda. She's 68. She takes a nighttime sleep aid. She takes something for bladder comfort. She uses a medication for nerve discomfort, and occasionally something for digestion. Each one, individually, seems reasonable, but together, they may be placing a higher burden on the same system in the brain. And no one has ever looked at the full picture. Not because anyone did something wrong, but because the system is often fragmented. Different recommendations, different moments, different needs. And over time, it all adds up. This pattern is more common than people realize, and it may be one of the most overlooked reasons why some people begin to feel less sharp than they used to. Now here's the encouraging part. In many cases, when this pattern is recognized and carefully adjusted, people notice real improvement. Clarity returns, focus improves. They feel more like themselves again. Not because something new was added, but because unnecessary burden was reduced. Your brain is not fragile, it's adaptable. It responds to the environment you create for it. And sometimes, small changes make a bigger difference than expected. So here's a simple plan you can start with. First, take a moment to write down everything you use regularly. Not just prescriptions, include over-the-counter products, sleep aids, supplements, everything. Even the things you only take occasionally. Second, look at the list as a whole, not as separate items, but as a combination. Ask yourself, do multiple things serve a similar purpose? Do they affect the same areas? Third, have a conversation. You can simply say, I'd like to review everything I'm taking to better understand how it may be affecting me. That alone can open the door to useful insights. Fourth, ask about whether anything can be simplified. Not removed abruptly, but gradually adjusted if appropriate. And finally, if you feel like your concerns aren't being fully addressed, it's okay to seek another perspective. You're not being difficult. You're being thoughtful about your well-being. Before we finish, I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever noticed changes in your focus, your memory, or your clarity, and didn't connect it to what you were taking? Has anything here sounded familiar? You're not alone in that, and sometimes, just becoming aware is the first step toward improvement. If you found this helpful, consider sharing it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. Because often, the people who need this information the most aren't actively looking for it, and one simple share can make a real difference. Thank you for spending this time here. Take care of your clarity, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next one.